Okay, we are going to move on to the final section of our lecture. I know y'all are probably tired of hearing me talk, but it's been fun to be able to share with you my thoughts nonetheless. So we're going to just move on really quickly to the self-care portion. And of course, there's been stuff woven all throughout these lectures of self-care pieces when we talked about boundaries and being able to talk to other people and how to not take your client stuff with you. But specifically, one thing I wanted to encourage y'all to do as it relates to trauma and crisis is to, if you need to create like a timeline or maybe some journaling or those sorts of things, is to start to process through your own traumas. Now, I want you to remember that trauma is subjective, okay? What is traumatic for you might not be traumatic for me and vice versa. However, it does not make your trauma or your crisis any more or less significant than the next person's. So to know your trauma and your loss history is going to be very, very important. That might mean that you need to go talk to somebody about that. Involve a professional or your own therapist in that process. What you're doing in that is you're taking care of yourself. You're saying, you know what, I need to work through these issues in order to be the most effective therapist that I can. And in that, start to recognize your triggers. What is it that kind of that gut pull when you are talking to a friend or a family member or a client or really anybody where you start to become triggered and you start to notice that you're ready to jump on somebody, that unfamiliar feeling? I just want you to start noticing those things because it's going to be important as you are starting to work with clients to keep yourself in check for that and then to give yourself permission to process through that at a later point, not in the session. So that's just my little self-care piece. The resources that I have for you guys this week are kind of fun. It's two different workbooks that I have here. The first one is called Love is a Choice. Basically, the little tagline here says letting go of unhealthy relationships. And the reason that I chose this workbook today is because it ties in very, very closely with knowing your triggers, but also your trauma or your loss history. This book is written from a Christian perspective, absolutely fabulous authors, and I feel like they do just such an excellent job of incorporating biblical truths into this. And it's essentially a book on codependency. Well, what's so neat is it goes through and you start to evaluate all of your different thoughts about relationships, your roles in them. There's a relationship inventory, finding or having room to explore where is it that I have maybe not taken care of myself. How do I change that? What do I need to do? Finding people to hold you accountability. This book is absolutely fabulous. Now, the second book that I grabbed, and you'll have to apologize because this isn't the actual book that I wanted to show you guys. It's called Boundaries in Dating, and the book that I wanted to show you guys was called Boundaries. This is by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. Now, if any of you have been in the church or in counseling or anything for any length of time, I'm sure you have heard of their series, Boundaries. They have books on regular boundaries, boundaries in marriage, boundaries in dating, boundaries with teenagers, boundaries with kids, all of these different boundaries books. And they also have workbooks that go with them. I would highly, highly recommend any of their books, but if I had to recommend just one for y'all that ties really closely with what we talked about today, it would be the regular Boundaries books. And it just is such a great job of taking an inventory of your relationships in your life, how you act, the expectations that you place on yourself and others place on you, and it helps you to set up those appropriate boundaries, that safety, so that you are more able to live out of the fullest sense of who you are. So those are my two resources for the week. We are going to talk just really, really briefly about next week. We're just going to kind of look ahead here. We have our community referral notebook that is due, and I wanted to give y'all just a little bit more insight onto that. There's not a specification as far as how many resources you need to have, and I just wanted to clarify for y'all that I would like you to have at least 15 community resources. Now, if you live in a small community, as I know some of you do, please feel free to look at some of the outlying communities and use what they have too. So if it's maybe within 30 to 60 miles or an hour driving distance, you can go ahead and use some of those also. In your community referral notebook, while you'll want to do this in APA format, you also can you can kind of section it off also. So you're going to have the name of the resource, their contact information, so that would be an address, phone number, email, website, and a contact person. You're also then going to give a brief description of what that resource is. What are the clientele that they see? What are the problems that they deal with? Other uniquenesses and specifics about that specific resource. So that's going to be week 4, and of course if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know and I will clear any of that up for you. I want to remind you that week 5 is coming, which means this class is almost over, but remember that there is an interview due week 5, and that's something we've talked about all the way from the beginning. So you guys by this point should have found somebody already that you can interview. And last week you'll notice that I sent y'all off a list of questions that might get you started and give you an idea or a direction to go in what you want to be asking that person that you're interviewing. Of course, if you have any other questions, let me know and I can definitely help you with that. So, this week we have got that community resource notebook that y'all are going to be working on. We have our reading, which is just going to be from the Floyd text this week. And then, of course, we have our group discussion board. So it's a very typical week, but I look forward to hearing what y'all have to say and interacting with you on the group discussion board. And I hope you guys have a great week.